I never expected those words at my daughter Jessica's rehearsal dinner. The room buzzed with laughter and excitement, champagne flowing freely as families merged. That was when Andrew, my soon-to-be son-in-law, pulled me aside. With a charming smile that never touched his cold eyes, he leaned close. His voice was perfectly polite as he delivered the blow. "Brianna, you know what would be the greatest wedding gift? You disappearing from our lives forever." I stood frozen, champagne glass trembling in my hand, as 20 years of motherhood collapsed around me. I became a widow when Jessica was just 12 years old. My husband Paul died suddenly of a heart attack while coaching her softball team. One moment he was cheering as she rounded second base. The next, he was gone. The memory of her small face crumpling when I had to tell her daddy wasn't coming home still haunts me during quiet nights. We only had each other after that. Our middle-class life transformed overnight. The life insurance helped initially, but it wasn't enough to sustain us long-term. I took on multiple jobs to keep our heads above water. During the day, I worked as an administrative assistant at the local college. Evenings and weekends, I waitressed at a family restaurant where the regulars tipped well, knowing my situation. Between shifts, I would drive Jessica to school activities, help with homework, and somehow manage to keep dinner on the table. Those years weren't just about survival. They forged an unbreakable bond between us. Jessica and I became a team. When I was exhausted from working 16-hour days, she would make me tea and rub my shoulders. When she struggled with algebra, I would stay up until midnight helping her understand the equations. We celebrated small victories together, like the day I was promoted to office manager, or when she won a scholarship to the science summer camp she desperately wanted to attend. By some miracle and endless overtime, I managed to save enough for Jessica's college education. She got accepted to State University with a partial scholarship, and I covered the rest. Those 4 years were tight financially, but worth every penny of debt I accumulated. Jessica graduated with honors in marketing, the first person in my family to earn a college degree. The day she walked across that stage in her cap and gown, I felt Paul would have been so proud of both of us for making it through. Jessica landed a good job at a marketing firm in the city and thrived. We talked daily, met for Sunday dinners, and took modest mother-daughter vacations when we could afford them. I finally paid off my debts and started building savings. By the time Jessica turned 30, I had managed to buy a beautiful 3-bedroom craftsman house in a nice neighborhood, thanks to an inheritance from my aunt and years of careful saving. Then Jessica met Andrew at a company event 3 years ago. He worked for an investment firm that partnered with her marketing agency on a project. She called me the night they met, bubbling with excitement about this incredibly charming and successful man who had asked her out. I was thrilled for her. After a string of mediocre relationships, my daughter deserved someone special. The first few times Andrew came to Sunday dinner, I was impressed. He was handsome, articulate, and seemed genuinely interested in Jessica. He brought expensive wine, complimented my cooking, and asked thoughtful questions about my life. I noticed he drove a luxury car and wore designer clothes, but Jessica assured me he was doing very well in finance. There were subtle warning signs I chose to ignore. Andrew frequently checked his phone during our conversations. He would sometimes make small comments about my quaint house or simple lifestyle that felt backhanded. When Jessica wasn't looking, his smile would drop, replaced by calculation in his eyes. But I dismissed these moments, telling myself I was being overprotective or old-fashioned. As their relationship progressed, I noticed changes in Jessica. She began canceling our regular get-togethers, saying Andrew had surprised her with weekend trips or exclusive dinner reservations. When we did meet, she seemed distracted, checking her phone constantly for his messages. Her wardrobe transformed from practical to designer, and she mentioned credit card bills with nervous laughter. When they announced their engagement after just 14 months of dating, I put on a happy face and threw them an engagement party. Andrew's parents flew in from California. They were pleasant but distant people who seemed more interested in appearances than connection. They made several comments about their vacation home in Aspen and their country club membership that made me feel decidedly middle class. During wedding planning, I offered my house as a wedding gift to the couple. I had been considering downsizing anyway, as the maintenance was becoming too much for me alone. Jessica was overjoyed, hugging me tightly with tears in her eyes. Andrew's reaction was more measured, a calculating look crossing his face before he thanked me generously. I told them I would transfer the deed after the honeymoon, giving myself time to find a smaller place. The rehearsal dinner was at an upscale restaurant Andrew selected. His parents covered the considerable bill, making sure everyone knew it. I wore my best dress, a blue silk number I had splurged on for the occasion. Jessica looked radiant, holding Andrew's hand and beaming as family and friends offered toasts. I was at the bar getting another mineral water when I overheard Andrew speaking to his best man, Troy, in what they thought was a private corner. I froze, glass in hand, as Andrew's words carried to me. "This marriage is my ticket to financial security, man," Andrew said, his voice low but clear. "Jessica's not exactly loaded, but that house is in a prime location and worth at least $700,000. Once we renovate, we can sell it for close to $1 million. What about her mother?" Troy asked. "Seems like they're pretty tight." Andrew laughed, a sound entirely different from the warm chuckle he used around Jessica. "The clingy mother is a temporary inconvenience. Once the house is officially ours, we'll create some distance. Jessica already agrees with everything I say anyway. Another year and Brianna will be lucky if she gets invited to Christmas dinner." I felt physically ill, my hand shaking so badly I had to set down my glass. This was the real Andrew, calculating and cold, seeing my daughter and me as nothing but stepping stones to wealth. I slipped away before they noticed me, mind racing as I rejoined the party with a plastic smile plastered on my face. For the rest of the evening, I watched Andrew with new eyes, noticing how his charm switched on and off depending on who was watching. I saw how he guided Jessica away whenever I approached to speak with her alone. Most painfully, I realized how thoroughly my intelligent, strong-willed daughter had been manipulated. Her personality and independence slowly eroded under his influence. As guests departed, Andrew pulled me aside with that perfect, practiced smile. With Jessica just steps away talking to her bridesmaids, he delivered those unimaginable words. "You know what would be the greatest wedding gift? You disappearing from our lives forever." My heart shattered, not just from the cruelty, but from the realization that he felt confident enough to say it directly. He believed Jessica was so firmly under his control that he no longer needed to pretend with me. And the worst part? He was right. The drive home from the rehearsal dinner was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, and tears streamed down my face unchecked. Andrew's words played on repeat in my mind. "You disappearing from our lives forever. 20 years of sacrifice for my daughter, and this was my reward. Being told I was unwanted, unnecessary, an inconvenience to be discarded." Once home, I poured myself a rare glass of whiskey and sank into my favorite armchair, the one I'd sit in to read Jessica bedtime stories when she was little. How had I missed the signs? Looking back, they were painfully obvious. It started with small things about 8 months into their relationship. Jessica began missing our weekly phone calls. When I finally reached her, she'd apologize profusely, explaining that Andrew had surprised her with concert tickets or a spontaneous dinner. I encouraged these romantic gestures, happy she had found someone who treated her specially. Then came the canceled Sunday dinners. What had once been our sacred tradition became increasingly rare. 3 months in a row, Jessica texted last-minute cancellations. "Andrew's got clients in town. Andrew's not feeling well. Andrew thinks we should visit his parents instead. Andrew. Andrew." When Jessica did visit, she arrived alone and checked her phone constantly. Our conversations changed too. My independent daughter, who once had strong opinions on everything from politics to pasta recipes, began prefacing her thoughts with "Andrew says," or "Andrew thinks." When I gently pointed this out, she became defensive. "He's just really smart about these things, Mom. You should hear him talk about investments and real estate. He knows so much." I remembered the first time I caught Andrew in a lie. He had told Jessica he was working late, but my friend Linda saw him having drinks with a blonde woman at a downtown hotel bar. When I carefully mentioned this to Jessica, her face hardened. That was a client meeting, Mom. God, why are you always so suspicious of him? Andrew warned me you might get jealous of our relationship. Jealous? The accusation stung deeply. I wasn't jealous. I was concerned. But Andrew had cleverly preempted my worries by painting them as petty emotions. Classic manipulation, though I didn't recognize it then. The changes in Jessica's appearance came next. My practical daughter, who once laughed at $300 handbags, suddenly wouldn't carry anything but designer brands. Her sensible wardrobe disappeared, replaced by expensive clothes that often seemed uncomfortable. When I complimented a particularly impractical pair of heels, she said, "Andrew likes me in higher shoes. He says they make my legs look better." Better. As if her legs needed improvement. The financial red flags waved brightly about 6 months ago. Over lunch, Jessica confessed she had accumulated significant credit card debt buying things for their future together. When I suggested she slow down her spending, she bristled. Andrew says these are investments in our image. His clients expect a certain lifestyle, and I need to match it. Once we're married, his income will cover everything. I later discovered Andrew had encouraged Jessica to put all these lifestyle investments on her cards, not his, despite his supposedly superior financial situation. Then came the incident with my family photos. I had dozens of framed pictures throughout my house, chronicling Jessica's childhood and our life with Paul. During a dinner at my home, Andrew commented that the photos were cluttering the space and would need to go when they moved in. When I objected, saying these were precious memories, Jessica sided with him. Mom, Andrew's right. The house does look dated with all these old pictures. We need to make it more modern. More modern. As if my memories were outdated decor items. The final straw came 3 weeks before the wedding. Jessica announced they were postponing their honeymoon to Hawaii so they could immediately renovate their house after the wedding. Andrew had already contacted contractors and selected new flooring, cabinets, and paint colors. They planned to modernize the craftsman details that gave my home its character. Andrew says with the right updates, the property value will increase at least 30%. Jessica explained enthusiastically. I reminded her gently that the house wasn't officially theirs yet. The deed transfer would happen after the honeymoon, as we'd agreed. Jessica's face fell, and she immediately called Andrew. He arrived within 30 minutes, all charm and reasonableness. Brianna, I completely understand your attachment to the house, he said soothingly. But wouldn't it be wonderful to see it transformed before you officially hand it over? To know Jessica and I will cherish it properly? Something in his tone made my skin crawl. It wasn't about cherishing my home. It was about increasing its value for a future sale. But with both of them staring at me expectantly, I weakly agreed to think about it. The morning before the wedding, I went to pick up my mother of the bride dress from Final Alterations. The boutique was in a shopping center across town. As I waited for the seamstress to bring out my dress, a young woman approached me hesitantly. Excuse me, are you Jessica Thornton's mother? I nodded, surprised. The woman was attractive, in her early 30s, with nervous eyes. I'm Samantha Wright. I used to date Andrew Carter. My heart began pounding immediately. She glanced around anxiously before continuing. I recognized you from Facebook photos. I've been trying to decide whether to contact you or Jessica for weeks. I know the wedding is tomorrow, but she needs to know who she's marrying. We moved to a coffee shop next door, where Samantha shared her story. She had dated Andrew for 18 months, ending about 6 months before he met Jessica. Like my daughter, Samantha came from a family with modest wealth, primarily tied up in property. Andrew had charmed her completely, isolating her from friends and family who questioned their relationship. He has a pattern, she explained, hands trembling around her coffee cup. He targets women with family money, especially property or assets that can be liquidated. He's patient and incredibly convincing. My throat tightened as she described a relationship that mirrored Jessica's with Andrew exactly. The love bombing beginning, the gradual isolation, the financial entanglement, the personality change. He convinced me to get my parents to sign over their lake house as an early inheritance for our future together. A week after the deed transferred, he broke up with me, claiming I had trust issues. He sold the property 3 months later. Samantha pulled out her phone and showed me text messages Andrew had sent to a friend, which the friend had forwarded to her after their breakup. My blood ran cold as I read, "Got another one lined up? This one's perfect. Trust fund baby with mommy issues. Her mother has this gorgeous craftsman that's gotta be worth 7 figures after renovations. My foolproof plan. Marriage, deed, transfer, distance from mom, then sell and split. 2 years max." The timestamp showed the texts were sent 2 weeks after he met Jessica. "There are others," Samantha said quietly. "At least 3 women I know of. He's never been caught because he does everything legally. He makes sure they sign over assets willingly." I felt physically ill. "Why are you telling me this now, the day before the wedding?" Samantha's eyes filled with tears. "I tried earlier. I sent Jessica a message months ago, but I'm pretty sure he monitors her social media. The message disappeared, and I was blocked. I've been working up the courage to approach you directly." She hesitated. "There's one more thing. These are from last week." She showed me more recent texts between Andrew and the same friend, discussing plans to access my retirement accounts once they controlled the house. "Old lady probably has decent savings too. Once the house is ours, Jessica can convince her to invest with me. One bad market turn and, oops, mom's money is gone." I sat there, numb with shock and betrayal, as the seamstress called my name repeatedly from across the shop. My mother of the bride dress hung forgotten as my world collapsed around me for the second time in 24 hours. I thanked Samantha, took her contact information, and collected my dress mechanically. The drive home passed in a daze of disbelief and mounting anger. Not just at Andrew, but at myself. How could I have missed this? How could I have failed to protect my daughter from such calculated predation? The house was quiet when I returned. Jessica was staying at her apartment for the traditional night before the wedding. I hung the dress in my closet and sat at my kitchen table, still in shock. Then, something inside me shifted. Decades of being a single mother had taught me how to make tough decisions quickly when necessary. This moment required exactly that strength. I would not let Andrew destroy my daughter's life. I would not be erased from her world. I would not hand over my home to a con artist. First, I called my lawyer, Franklin Turner. We'd been friends since college, and he had helped with my husband's estate and the purchase of my home. It was after 6 in the evening, but I knew he would answer. "Franklin, I need emergency legal help. Can you come over right now?" To his credit, Franklin arrived within 30 minutes, still in his office suit. I told him everything, showing him the text screenshots Samantha had sent to my phone. His face darkened as I spoke. "This is elder financial abuse waiting to happen, Brianna. And from what you're describing, Jessica is already experiencing emotional manipulation and financial coercion. What can I do?" "The wedding is tomorrow." Franklin thought carefully. "The house is still in your name. You have every legal right to change your mind about gifting it. The question is whether you want to stop the wedding or protect your assets." I considered this. Jessica won't believe me if I try to stop the wedding. She's too deep under his influence. But I can protect what's mine and create a situation where she might see the truth herself. For the next hour, we developed a plan. First, Franklin drafted a document revoking my promise to transfer the house. Then he called a real estate contact who specialized in private, accelerated sales. My second call was to my financial advisor, Grace Lewis. Like Franklin, she came immediately when I explained the urgency. She helped me secure my accounts, changing passwords and adding extra security measures to prevent unauthorized access. We moved my retirement funds to new accounts Andrew wouldn't know about. "This man was planning to clean you out, Brianna," Grace said grimly, reviewing the text evidence. "And he almost had everything lined up perfectly." My third call was to my realtor, Diane Washington. She had sold me the house 8 years ago and knew its value intimately. When she heard my situation, she immediately thought of a couple, the Millers, who had admired my home during an open house for the property next door last year. They had even left their card, asking her to contact them if I ever decided to sell. They're pre-approved for a cash purchase and have been looking for exactly your style of home for over a year, Diane explained. I think they would jump at an expedited private sale, even at slightly above market value. It was nearing midnight when I finished these conversations. I sat alone in my living room, looking at the space that held 20 years of memories. The corner where Jessica's Christmas trees had stood. The wall where I'd marked her height each year. The window seat where I'd read her stories. This house was more than an asset. It was the physical embodiment of our life together. But Andrew had already tainted it. In his eyes, and now in mine, it had been reduced to dollar signs and profit margins. I could never feel the same about it again. At 7 the next morning, the Millers arrived to tour the house. They were a lovely couple in their 40s, with 2 teenage children. As they walked through, admiring the craftsman details Andrew had planned to destroy, I felt a sense of rightness. This family would cherish the home as we had. We've been looking for over 2 years, Mrs. Miller explained. Nothing has felt right until now. This house has such a warm energy. By 9, we were reviewing paperwork. The Millers offered $50,000 above asking price for a 24-hour closing, with the condition I could stay in the house for up to 2 weeks after the sale. Franklin had already prepared the necessary documents to make this possible. While this whirlwind transaction proceeded, I contacted a moving company for an emergency pack and move service. They would arrive the following day to box essential items and place them in storage until I found a new home. The final element of my plan required the most courage. I drafted a letter detailing everything I had learned about Andrew, including Samantha's testimony and the damning text messages. I made copies of financial records showing his massive personal debt, which he had hidden from Jessica. The private investigator Franklin recommended had worked through the night and delivered preliminary findings, showing Andrew had an outstanding lawsuit from another family who claimed he had defrauded them in an investment opportunity. Most shocking of all, the investigator found evidence that Andrew had approached contractors about selling my antique furniture and family heirlooms after the renovation. Items he had specifically told Jessica they would preserve for sentimental reasons. As a final devastating blow, there were photos of Andrew with another woman taken at a hotel bar just 2 weeks earlier. They were clearly intimate, his hand on her thigh, her lips at his ear. I compiled everything into individual envelopes, one for each guest table at the reception. On the outside, I wrote, "The truth about Andrew Carter, open during reception." Then I added a note explaining that half the proceeds from my house sale had been donated to a charity supporting victims of financial abuse, in Jessica's name. The other half would support my new life, where I would wait for her when she was ready to find me. The final touch was a private letter just for Jessica, expressing my unconditional love and my door always being open when she needed me. By 3 in the afternoon, 6 hours before the wedding ceremony, I had sold my house, secured my finances, arranged for my belongings to be moved, and prepared the truth bombs that would detonate during the reception. The closing documents were signed, the money transferred to my new accounts. I showered, did my hair and makeup with special care, and put on my blue mother of the bride dress. Before leaving for the church, I took one last look around the house that had sheltered our little family through so many years. "I'm sorry, Jessica," I whispered to the empty rooms. "This will hurt you terribly, but watching him destroy your life would hurt so much more." I picked up the stack of envelopes, placed them carefully in a decorative box that matched the wedding decor, and drove to the wedding venue with a heart both breaking and resolute. The Riverside Gardens venue looked like something from a fairy tale as I arrived. White roses and baby's breath adorned every surface. Twinkling lights hung from the trees surrounding the garden where the ceremony would take place. A white carpet created an aisle between rows of white chairs, leading to an arch of flowers where Jessica would say her vows. In the adjacent tent, round tables were set for the reception, each with elaborate centerpieces and fine china. I slipped into the reception area while the wedding coordinator was occupied with a flower delivery. Quickly and discreetly, I placed one envelope at each table, tucking them partially under the centerpieces so they wouldn't be immediately noticed, but would be discovered during the reception dinner. The bridal suite was buzzing with activity when I entered. Jessica sat at a vanity while the makeup artist applied the finishing touches. She looked breathtakingly beautiful in her lace robe, her dark hair swept up in an elegant updo with a few tendrils framing her face. For a moment, I saw my little girl again, dressing up in my clothes and parading around the living room. "Mom!" She jumped up to hug me, her face radiant with excitement. I was starting to worry. "You're cutting it close." I hugged her tightly, breathing in her familiar scent, wondering if this would be our last embrace for a long time. "I wouldn't miss this for the world, sweetheart." The bridesmaids fluttered around us, taking photos and touching up their makeup. I helped Jessica into her gown, a stunning fitted design with delicate beading. As I fastened the tiny pearl buttons up her back, I remembered teaching her to tie her shoes, braid her hair, fasten her first bra. All those motherly moments that Andrew wanted to erase from her life. "You look perfect," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "Your father would be so proud." Jessica's eyes welled with tears. "I wish he was here to walk me down the aisle." "He is here, in a way." I touched her heart. "And so am I, always." Her uncle Thomas, Paul's brother, was giving her away. He appeared at the doorway, handsome in his tuxedo, and whistled appreciatively at the sight of Jessica. "Ready, beautiful? It's showtime." I took my seat in the front row as the music began. Andrew stood at the altar, devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, the picture of a devoted groom. Only I could see the calculation behind his smile, the triumph in his eyes as he watched Jessica approach. He was so close to his prize, so confident in his victory that he actually winked at me when our eyes met. The ceremony proceeded like a beautiful dream, or perhaps a nightmare in disguise. Jessica and Andrew exchanged traditional vows, promising to love and cherish each other forever. His voice was firm and convincing as he pledged his faithfulness. If I hadn't seen the evidence myself, even I might have believed him. After the ceremony, guests moved to the reception tent for cocktails while the wedding party took photos. I circulated among family members, accepting congratulations and deflecting questions about my somewhat subdued demeanor with claims of emotional overwhelm. The reception began with the grand entrance of the wedding party. Jessica and Andrew danced their first dance to "At Last," her head resting trustingly on his shoulder. Then dinner was served, a gourmet meal I could barely taste. Throughout the meal, I watched the tables anxiously, waiting for someone to discover an envelope. It happened during the salad course. An elderly cousin of Andrew's picked up the envelope at her table, peered at it curiously, and opened it. I watched her face transform from curiosity to shock to horror. She nudged her husband, who read the contents with growing alarm. Soon, guests at other tables discovered their envelopes too. A wave of murmurs spread through the reception as shocking revelations were passed from person to person. Andrew was midway through his groom's speech, thanking everyone for coming, and offering a special thanks to me for giving them so much, when he noticed the disturbance. His eyes narrowed as he saw the envelopes being passed around, faces turning toward him with confusion and disgust. "What's going on?" Jessica whispered, noticing the change in atmosphere. Before Andrew could control the situation, his own father stood up, envelope in hand, face ashen. "Andrew, what the hell is this? You've been sued for fraud? You have another girlfriend?" The tent fell silent. Andrew's charming mask slipped for just an instant before he recovered, forcing a laugh. "Dad, what are you talking about? Is this some kind of joke?" Jessica grabbed the envelope from her new father-in-law, her hands shaking as she examined the contents. Her face drained of color as she looked from the documents to Andrew, then to me. Understanding dawned in her eyes. "Mom? Did you do this?" Her voice was barely audible. I stood up slowly, feeling every eye in the room on me. "Yes, Jessica. I had to show you the truth before it was too late." Andrew stepped between us, addressing the stunned crowd. "Everyone, please stay calm. Brianna has been struggling emotionally with Jessica getting married. She's fabricated these ridiculous claims because she can't let go. Classic empty nest syndrome taken to an extreme." His best man Troy shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact with everyone. He knew the truth, having been complicit in Andrew's plans. Andrew turned to Jessica, taking her hands in his. Baby, your mom needs help. She's making up these crazy stories because she's afraid of losing you. Remember how I told you she might try something like this? Jessica looked confused, torn between the man she loved and the mother who had never lied to her. Then a ripple of fresh shock moved through the crowd as a latecomer entered the tent. Samantha Wright walked confidently to the center of the room, directly facing Andrew. Hello, Andrew. Remember me? She turned to Jessica. I'm Samantha, Andrew's ex. Everything in those envelopes is true. I know because he did the same thing to me and at least 3 other women. Andrew's face contorted with rage before he could control it. Security! Remove this woman immediately! He shouted. Though there was no security team at the small wedding, Jessica stood frozen, looking between Samantha, the damning documents in her hands, and Andrew's increasingly desperate face. Andrew, is this true? Did you really write these texts about my mother? About our house? Of course not, baby. She's manipulated these images. You know how tech-savvy your mother isn't. Someone's helping her frame me because they're jealous of what we have. I stepped forward. Jessica, I sold the house yesterday. It was still mine to sell, and I couldn't let him take it from us. Half the money is in a trust for you that he can never touch. The other half is securing my future. Andrew's face turned purple with rage. You did what? He turned to Jessica, grabbing her arms roughly. Did you know about this? Did you help her screw me over? His mask had fully slipped now, revealing the calculating, angry man beneath. Guests gasped at his roughness, his naked rage. Take your hands off my niece. Uncle Thomas stepped between them, physically separating Andrew from Jessica. Chaos erupted in the reception tent. Andrew's parents huddled together, looking mortified. Several guests began gathering their belongings, heading for the exits. Andrew's groomsmen stood awkwardly, clearly unsure whether to defend him or distance themselves. Through the commotion, a clear voice rang out. I have something to add. It was Natalie, Jessica's college best friend and bridesmaid. She looked terrified, but determined as all eyes turned to her. Jess, I should have told you months ago. Andrew made a pass at me during your engagement party. When I rejected him, he threatened to convince you I was lying out of jealousy if I ever told you. Jessica's face crumpled, the final betrayal too much to bear. She looked at Andrew with new eyes, seeing clearly for the first time the monster behind the mask. Without a word, she pulled the wedding ring from her finger and dropped it onto the pristine white tablecloth. Then she turned and walked straight out of the tent, alone. I moved to follow her, but Andrew blocked my path, his handsome face twisted with hatred. You miserable old witch. You've ruined everything. No, Andrew, you did that all by yourself. I stepped around him and followed my daughter out into the garden, leaving the ruins of the wedding behind me. I found Jessica sitting on a stone bench in the rose garden, still in her wedding gown, staring blankly at the flowers. She didn't look up when I approached, but her body stiffened, sensing my presence. Is it all true? Her voice was hollow. I sat beside her, careful to leave space between us. Yes, sweetheart. All of it. I only found out yesterday, from Samantha and then the investigator. I couldn't let you marry him without knowing the truth. Jessica turned to me then, her makeup streaked with tears, her expression a mixture of grief and fury. You sold our house. You created this public spectacle. You humiliated me in front of everyone we know. On my wedding day. Each accusation hit like a physical blow. I did what I thought was right to protect you. Protect me? Her laugh was bitter. By destroying the happiest day of my life? By making me look like a complete fool? Would you rather I let him take everything from us? Let him isolate you completely? Jessica. He was planning to access my retirement accounts after getting the house. He has another girlfriend. He approached contractors about selling our family heirlooms without telling you. She flinched at each revelation but shook her head stubbornly. You could have told me privately. We could have postponed the wedding, figured things out together. Instead, you chose the most public, humiliating way possible to expose him. The truth of her words stung. Perhaps I had acted too drastically, too quickly. But Andrew's words at the rehearsal dinner had triggered something primal in me. A mother's desperate need to protect her child at any cost. You're right. I should have tried to tell you first. But would you have believed me over him? Be honest, Jessica. Her silence was answer enough. She wouldn't have believed me. Andrew had spent years systematically undermining our relationship, positioning himself as her protector, and me as an interfering, jealous mother. I need space from both of you right now. Jessica stood abruptly, her wedding dress rustling. I can't even look at Andrew, but I'm not ready to forgive you either. Where will you go? Your apartment is filled with wedding gifts, and the house is sold. I'll stay with Natalie tonight. After that, I don't know. She hesitated, vulnerability breaking through her anger. Is it really sold? Our house? I nodded, tears forming. The Millers bought it. That family that admired it last year? They'll take good care of it. And where will you go? I hadn't thought that far ahead yet. In my rush to protect Jessica from Andrew, I had upended both our lives without a clear plan for after. I'm not sure yet. Somewhere new, I think. A fresh start. Jessica's face hardened again. That's what you wanted, right? What Andrew wanted too, apparently. Everyone wants to disappear from my life. No, sweetheart. I'm not disappearing. I'll always be here for you. But I think we both need some space to heal. She looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she turned and walked away, the train of her wedding dress dragging through the grass, a heartbreaking image of abandoned dreams. Back at the reception, most guests had left. Andrew and his parents were huddled with the venue coordinator, likely trying to minimize financial damage. He glared at me venomously as I gathered my purse and wrap. Uncle Thomas appeared at my side, protectively escorting me to my car. You did the right thing, Brianna, he said quietly. Paul would have done the same. I nodded, unable to speak through my tears. The vindication felt hollow against the pain of Jessica's rejection. The following days passed in a blur of activity. The moving company packed my essential belongings while I searched online for a place to rent temporarily. I settled on a small coastal town called Seabrook, 3 states away. Far enough for a fresh start, but close enough to return if Jessica needed me. I left a letter for Jessica with Natalie, explaining everything in detail and providing a special email address where she could reach me when she was ready. Then I drove away from the home and city where I'd spent my entire adult life, unsure if I had saved my daughter or lost her forever. Seabrook welcomed me with its charming main street, quiet beaches, and general anonymity. I rented a modest 1-bedroom cottage within walking distance of the ocean, furnished it simply with new items, and tried to establish routines. Morning walks on the beach, afternoon explorations of local shops, evening meals on my small porch, watching the sunset. Weeks passed with no word from Jessica. Through mutual friends, I heard fragments of information. She had returned to work. She had moved to a new apartment. Andrew had tried repeatedly to contact her, alternating between apologies and threats, but she had obtained a restraining order on the advice of Franklin, my lawyer, who had generously offered to represent her. The hardest part was the silence. After 35 years of being a mother, with all the daily texts, calls, and shared moments that entailed, the absence of Jessica in my life created a physical ache. I checked my special email account obsessively, but it remained empty. I joined a local art class to fill my evenings, rediscovering a passion for painting I had abandoned after Paul's death. The focus required helped quiet my anxious mind, and the other students, mostly retirees, were welcoming without being intrusive. On the recommendation of a woman from my art class, I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Eleanor Reed. Our sessions helped me process my grief and guilt. You made the best decision you could with the information you had. Dr. Reed reminded me during a particularly difficult session. You protected your daughter from financial and emotional abuse, but I hurt her in the process, I countered. I humiliated her. Sometimes protection involves pain, like setting a broken bone or cleaning an infected wound. It hurts in the moment, but prevents greater suffering later. This perspective helped, but the silence from Jessica still wounded deeply. 2 months passed this way, me building a semblance of a new life while constantly looking over my shoulder, hoping for reconciliation. Then, one evening in late autumn, I received notification that someone had sent a message to my special email account. My hands trembled so badly I could barely enter the password. The message was brief. "I need to see you. Where are you? Jessica." I responded immediately with my address and phone number, adding that she was welcome anytime, day or night. 3 days later, as I was returning from my morning beach walk, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked outside my cottage. My heart raced as I approached and saw Jessica sitting on my porch steps. She looked thinner, her face drawn with exhaustion. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a sweater, so different from the designer clothes Andrew had preferred. When she saw me, she stood hesitantly. For a long moment, we simply looked at each other across the small front yard. Then she spoke, her voice rough with emotion. "You were right about everything, Mom. I've spent 2 months investigating it all myself. It was even worse than you knew. There were 2 other women before Samantha. And the texts about your retirement accounts? He had already contacted your bank, pretending to be your financial advisor." Relief and sorrow washed through me in equal measure. I climbed the steps slowly, giving her space to retreat if she wanted. "I'm so sorry you had to go through this, Jessica. I was so angry with you," she continued. "For the public humiliation, for selling our house, for being right when I desperately wanted you to be wrong." Her voice broke on the last word, and I couldn't stop myself from reaching for her. She fell into my arms, sobbing against my shoulder like she had as a little girl with skinned knees or teenage heartbreaks. I held her tightly, my own tears flowing freely. "I've missed you so much," I whispered into her hair. "I've missed you too, Mom." She pulled back to look at me, her face wet with tears but somehow lighter. "Can we talk? Really talk? About everything?" I nodded, opening my cottage door. "I have all the time in the world." Jessica stayed for 3 days. We talked for hours, painfully unraveling the web of manipulation Andrew had woven around both of us. She showed me evidence she had gathered, working with a different private investigator to document Andrew's history of predatory relationships. The pattern was consistent. He targeted women with family assets, isolated them from loved ones who might see through his facade, then extracted wealth before moving on to his next victim. "How did I not see it?" Jessica asked repeatedly, pacing my small living room. "I'm a marketing professional. I understand persuasion techniques. How could I fall for this?" "Because he was good at it," I explained gently. "Con artists like Andrew are successful precisely because they're skilled at manipulation. And when emotions are involved, even the most intelligent people can be vulnerable." Jessica admitted that our relationship had been strained long before the wedding disaster. Andrew had systematically driven wedges between us, making subtle comments that planted seeds of doubt about my motives and mental stability. He would say things like, "Your mom seems really stressed lately. Has she always been this controlling?" Or, "Don't you think it's odd how she wants to know every detail of our finances?" "My parents would never pry like that." Jessica shook her head. "It was so gradual, I didn't realize he was turning me against you." The most painful revelations came when Jessica described how Andrew had encouraged her to put wedding expenses on her credit cards while he contributed minimally, claiming his assets were tied up in investments. She had accumulated nearly $30,000 in debt that she was now struggling to pay off. "He always had explanations for why his money wasn't available right away," she explained. "Market fluctuations, transfer delays, administrative holds. I believed every word." Before she left, I offered to help with her debt, but Jessica refused. "This is part of my healing process. Taking responsibility for my own finances again, making my own decisions." We agreed to maintain boundaries while rebuilding our relationship. Jessica would stay in the city, focusing on her career and rebuilding her independence. I would remain in Seabrook, continuing my new life. We would visit monthly, and speak weekly, giving each other space to process our individual traumas. I need to learn who I am without Andrew's influence, Jessica explained, and without depending too much on you either. I love you, Mom, but I need to stand on my own for a while. Though her words stung slightly, I recognized their truth and wisdom. Our relationship had been intensely close after Paul died, perhaps to an unhealthy degree. This separation, painful as it was, might allow Jessica to develop a stronger sense of self. After Jessica returned to the city, my days in Seabrook took on new purpose. I continued my morning beach walks, finding peace in the rhythm of waves against shore. I expanded my art classes, discovering a talent for watercolor landscapes that surprised and delighted me. My small paintings began selling at a local gallery, providing modest supplemental income and creative fulfillment. Dr. Reed helped me work through lingering guilt about the public wedding confrontation. You were in crisis mode, she reminded me. Fight or flight. Your maternal instinct to protect Jessica overrode everything else. I wish I had found a gentler way, I admitted. Perhaps. But would a gentler approach have broken through years of manipulation? Sometimes a shock is necessary to disrupt entrenched patterns. 3 months after Jessica's visit, I made a significant decision. I purchased a small 2-bedroom bungalow in Seabrook, committing to this town as my new home. The house needed considerable updating, but unlike Andrew's plans for our family home, my renovations would preserve its character while making it uniquely mine. I painted the walls in soft coastal colors, planted lavender and rosemary in the garden, and set up a small studio for my painting in the 2nd bedroom. Jessica came to help me move in, bringing housewarming gifts and her newfound confidence. She had secured a promotion at work and was thriving professionally. She had also started therapy, working through the relationship trauma Andrew had caused. I'm dating again, she admitted over dinner on my new patio. Very cautiously. His name is Daniel. He's a high school English teacher who writes poetry in his spare time. The opposite of Andrew in every way, I observed with a smile. Exactly. And I'm taking things glacially slow. No talk of moving in together or sharing finances. We've been seeing each other for 2 months, and he hasn't even left a toothbrush at my place. We both laughed, the sound healing something between us. As spring turned to summer, I established deeper roots in Seabrook. I joined the community garden, volunteered at the local library, and made genuine friends for the first time in years. My neighbors, a retired couple named James and Eleanor Davidson, often invited me for dinner or joined me for beach walks. James was a former literature professor with a dry wit and endless book recommendations. Eleanor taught pottery classes at the community center and convinced me to try working with clay, expanding my artistic horizons. Their warmth and acceptance helped me feel truly at home in Seabrook. One evening in late July, I was having dinner with the Davidsons when Eleanor asked, "Have you met our new neighbor yet?" "Another transplant, like you," James nodded enthusiastically. "William Foster. Retired architect. Moved here from Chicago after his wife passed. Fascinating fellow with great stories." I met William the following week at a community center fundraiser. He was tall and distinguished, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. We connected immediately over a shared love of historic architecture and watercolor painting. He had taken up the hobby during his wife's illness as a form of stress relief and continued it after her passing. "It helps me see beauty in small moments," he explained as we examined an exhibit of local artists, including one of my coastal scenes. When he learned I had painted it, his admiration seemed genuine and unforced. "You have a remarkable talent for capturing light," he said, studying the way sunlight filtered through breaking waves in my painting. We began spending time together casually, meeting for coffee after morning beach walks or attending community events as friends. William was respectful of my boundaries and never pushed for more than I was ready to give. He understood grief and rebuilding, having navigated his own journey after losing his wife of 40 years to cancer. 6 months after our first meeting, William asked me to dinner at Seabrook's nicest restaurant, a small seafood place overlooking the harbor. After a lovely meal, he reached across the table to take my hand. "Brianna, I've grown very fond of you. I'd like to explore whether there might be something more between us than friendship, but only if you're open to the possibility. His directness was refreshing after Andrew's manipulations. No games, no hidden agendas, just honest communication between two adults. I'd like that too, I replied, surprising myself with how easy the words came. But I should warn you, I have some trust issues after what happened with my daughter's ex-fiancé. William nodded seriously. Then we'll move at whatever pace feels comfortable for you. I'm not going anywhere. I told Jessica about William during our next weekly call. She was cautiously supportive but asked pointed questions about his background and behavior. Does he try to isolate you from friends? Does he make you feel bad about yourself? Does he pressure you financially? I reassured her that William exhibited none of these red flags. In fact, he encouraged my independence and seemed genuinely interested in my painting career. I've learned to watch for the signs now, Jessica. But thank you for looking out for me. That's what family does, she replied, the simple statement healing another piece of our fractured bond. In October, 6 months after my first meeting with William, and almost exactly 1 year after the wedding disaster, Jessica came for a weekend visit with Daniel. The four of us shared meals, played board games, and walked the autumn beach together. Watching Jessica laugh freely with Daniel, seeing the respectful way he treated her, brought profound relief. She was healing, finding joy again. On their last evening, while William and Daniel were picking up takeout for dinner, Jessica pulled me aside on the porch swing. I need to thank you properly, she said quietly, for saving me from Andrew, even though it hurt at the time. If that wedding had gone forward, if he had gotten legal access to everything, she shuddered. I can't imagine where I'd be now. I squeezed her hand. You would have figured it out eventually. You're smarter than I ever was. She shook her head firmly. No, Mom. You were brave when I was blind. You risked losing me to save me. That's the kind of courage I aspire to. We sat together as twilight settled over the ocean, the silence between us comfortable and healing. After a while, Jessica spoke again. Are you happy here, Mom? With your painting and William and this new life? I considered the question seriously. Yes, I am. Not in the way I expected to be at this stage of life. Not with the house we loved or the city we knew, but in a deeper way, perhaps. Jessica nodded thoughtfully. I think I understand. I'm finding that kind of happiness too, building something new instead of trying to salvage what was broken. As we watched the first stars appear over the water, I realized we had both found our way to something precious through the painful journey of the past year. Not just survival, but transformation. Not just healing, but growth. William's car pulled into the driveway, headlights sweeping across the porch. Daniel jumped out, carrying bags of food and laughing at something William had said. Jessica squeezed my hand once more before standing to help them. We're going to be okay, Mom. Better than okay. And for the first time since Andrew had whispered those cruel words at the rehearsal dinner, I truly believed it. The year following the wedding disaster transformed both Jessica and me in ways neither of us could have imagined. What Andrew intended as cruel rejection became instead a catalyst for growth, pushing us to examine unhealthy patterns and build more authentic lives. Jessica found an apartment in a vibrant neighborhood near her office. She excelled at work, earning a second promotion to marketing director for her firm's largest accounts. Her relationship with Daniel progressed naturally, without the whirlwind intensity that had characterized her time with Andrew. They enjoyed discovering each other slowly, building trust through consistent actions rather than grand gestures or expensive gifts. Daniel asked if I wanted to move in with him, Jessica told me during one of our weekly calls, 6 months into their relationship. I told him I wasn't ready yet. How did he take it? I asked, remembering how Andrew had sulked or manipulated whenever Jessica asserted boundaries. He said he completely understood and would ask again in a few months if things continued going well. No pressure, no guilt trip, just respect for my timeline. 3 months later, Jessica did move in with Daniel, but with careful financial boundaries. They split expenses proportionally based on income. They maintained separate bank accounts alongside one joint account for household costs. Most importantly, they had explicit discussions about money and expectations, the kind of transparent conversations Andrew had always avoided. Meanwhile, my life in Seabrook blossomed in unexpected ways. My watercolor paintings attracted a following at local galleries, and I began teaching weekend workshops for tourists and residents. The modest income supplemented my retirement savings, which had remained secure thanks to our quick action before the wedding. William and I continued our relationship at a measured pace. We enjoyed quiet dinners, long walks, and animated discussions about books and art. He helped me install bookshelves in my studio and taught me basic carpentry skills. I introduced him to new cooking techniques and persuaded him to try yoga classes at the community center. Unlike my relationship with Paul, which had been characterized by passionate intensity and occasional volatility, my connection with William felt like a calm harbor after a lifetime at sea. We brought our fully formed adult selves to the relationship, with no need to complete or rescue each other. 8 months after our first date, William proposed, not with a diamond ring or grand gesture, but with a heartfelt conversation on my porch swing. "I don't need or want to change anything about our daily lives," he explained. "I love our independence and the way we choose to be together rather than need to be. But I'd like to make a formal commitment, if you would." I agreed, with one stipulation. No big wedding, just our closest friends and family, here in the garden. William laughed, understanding the reason behind my request. "Absolutely. The smallest, simplest ceremony possible." Jessica's reaction to our engagement news was cautiously supportive. "Are you sure, Mom? It seems fast after everything that happened." "At 70, nothing feels very fast anymore," I replied. "But I've learned from your experience with Andrew. William and I are keeping our finances separate. We've both met with attorneys to update our wills and establish clear boundaries. And most importantly, I've known him for almost a year as a friend before anything romantic developed." This reassured Jessica, who agreed to help plan our small ceremony. She and Daniel flew out for a long weekend, bringing engagement gifts and wedding ideas. During that visit, Jessica shared news of her own. "I've been offered a position with a marketing firm here, in Seabrook's neighboring city. It's a substantial promotion, heading their creative department." My heart leapt at the possibility of having her nearby. "Are you considering it?" She nodded. "Daniel could transfer to the high school there. We've been talking about leaving the city anyway, finding somewhere with a better quality of life." She hesitated. "But I wanted to check with you first. Would it feel like I'm invading your new life?" I hugged her tightly. "Having you nearby would be the greatest gift. But only if it's truly what you want." "It is," she assured me. "Not because I need you, or you need me, but because I value having family close. These past months have taught me that independence doesn't have to mean isolation." 2 months later, Jessica and Daniel moved to a charming craftsman-style house just 30 minutes from my Seabrook bungalow. She started her new job, thriving in the creative leadership role. Daniel began teaching English at the local high school, where his passion for literature quickly made him a student favorite. William and I married in my garden on a perfect June day, surrounded by 20 of our closest friends and family. Jessica stood beside me as my maid of honor. William's son John served as best man. The ceremony lasted 15 minutes, followed by a catered lunch under rented tents. Before the small gathering dispersed, William tapped his glass for attention. "Brianna and I want to thank you all for sharing this day with us. We've both experienced profound loss and unexpected joy in our lives. What we've learned is that family isn't just who you're born to or who you marry. It's who stands by you through difficult times and celebrates with you in good ones." I looked around at our assembled loved ones, Jessica and Daniel, William's children and grandchildren, my new friends from Seabrook, even Uncle Thomas, representing connections to my past life and Paul's memory. This tapestry of relationships had formed not despite the wedding disaster but because of it, pushing me out of comfortable patterns into a richer, more authentic life. That evening, after our guests departed, William and I sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset over the ocean. "Happy?" he asked simply. "Very," I replied, leaning against his shoulder. though not in ways I would have predicted. The best happiness rarely follows the expected path, he observed. It finds us when we're brave enough to walk away from what hurts us, even when staying seems easier. His words captured exactly what I had learned through the painful journey from Andrew's cruel rejection to this moment of contentment. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to disappear from toxic situations and reappear where we can truly flourish. 1 year after our wedding, we hosted a New Beginnings dinner in our garden, which William had helped expand with raised vegetable beds and a small greenhouse for year-round growing. Jessica and Daniel arrived first, bringing homemade bread and wine. They had news to share, looking at each other with barely contained excitement. "We're expecting a baby in February," Jessica announced, her hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. Joy surged through me at the thought of becoming a grandmother, of Jessica experiencing the profound love I had felt for her. "That's wonderful news. There's more," Daniel added, his arm around Jessica's shoulders. "We're engaged. We wanted to wait until we felt absolutely certain, and now we do." "A small ceremony," Jessica added quickly. "Just family and close friends. Nothing elaborate. And absolutely no envelopes at the reception tables," Daniel joked, earning a playful swat from Jessica. We all laughed. The painful past transformed into a family story we could now reference with humor rather than hurt. As other guests arrived, the garden filled with conversation and laughter. William's children with their spouses, our Seabrook friends. Even Natalie, Jessica's college friend who had bravely spoken up at the disastrous first wedding. Looking around at this gathering, I reflected on how completely Andrew had failed in his cruel intention. He had wanted me to disappear from Jessica's life, believing he could replace our bond with his manipulation. Instead, he had vanished, while our family had expanded and strengthened. The last I heard, Andrew had moved to Arizona, where he was reportedly engaged to another woman with family money. I hoped she would discover his true nature before experiencing the pain Jessica had endured. But that was no longer my concern or responsibility. My focus remained on the beautiful life unfolding around me, proof that endings can become beginnings when we have the courage to walk away from what damages us. As the evening progressed, William raised his glass in a toast. To family, chosen and born. To second chances and new beginnings. And most of all, to Brianna, who had the wisdom to recognize a wolf in sheep's clothing and the courage to protect those she loves, even at great personal cost. Jessica stood next, her eyes meeting mine across the table. To my mom, who taught me that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away, and that true love means wanting what's best for others, even when it's painful. Tears filled my eyes as I absorbed their words. From the darkness of that rehearsal dinner, through the painful wedding day confrontation, to this moment of genuine connection and joy, the journey had been worth every difficult step. As twilight settled over our garden gathering, I understood the profound truth at the heart of my experience. Sometimes, granting someone's cruel wish in an unexpected way becomes the greatest gift you can give yourself. By disappearing from the toxic situation Andrew created, I had reappeared in a life more authentic and fulfilling than I could have imagined. I hope this story resonates with anyone facing difficult choices about toxic relationships. Have you ever had to walk away from someone or something that was hurting you, even when staying seemed easier? Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is disappear from situations that damage us and reappear where we can truly thrive. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Like this video if it touched you. Subscribe for more stories of courage and resilience, and share with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to begin again.